And so now we are honored to have Dr. Bhavya Lal join us. Dr. Lal serves as the Senior Advisor to the NASA Administrator for Budget and Finance. She was a senior-most White House appointee and acting Chief of Staff at NASA for the first 100 days of the Biden administration. And before that, she served as a member of the Biden Presidential Transition Agency Review Team for both NASA and the Department of Defense. Dr. Lal brings extensive experience in engineering and space technology, serving as a member of the research staff at IDA and STPI from 2005 to 2020. She has applied her expertise in engineering systems and innovation theory and practice to topics in space, with recent projects on commercial activities in low Earth orbit and deep space, in orbit servicing, assembly, manufacturing, small satellites, human exploration, space nuclear power, space exploration, and space science. Very, very exciting to have you here with us, Dr. Lal. I'll turn it over to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. It's my third year participating in this conference, and I couldn't be delighted. I wish I could be there in person, but this is, as you can imagine, things are pretty intense in the A suite at NASA. Let's get started, though. I want to speak to you about the relevance of China's cislunar activities in light of our own plans to return to the moon. So, starting with our best understanding of China's plans, it will come as no surprise to any of you that China is emerging as a leader in space with growing momentum in its deep space activities. China has a systematic and stepwise lunar program. In phase 1 through 2020, they circled the moon with Chang'e 1 and 2. Phase 2 was to robotically land on the moon. China did so by 2018 with Chang'e 3 and 4. Phase 3 was to return samples from the moon back to Earth. China has done so with Chang'e 5 and is planning to return additional samples from the South Pole with Chang'e 6 in 2024. As an aside, this mission includes French and other international participants, and that's something we should return to. And Chang'e 6 is also the start of their International Lunar Research Station, ILRS. Next, China is planning a lunar polar research station, this ILRS I mentioned, with Chang'e 7 and Chang'e 8 in the 2024 and 2026 timeframes, 26 to 28 timeframes. Chang'e 7 is expected to include a large number of scientific and tech demonstration payloads, including a hopper, which we've been talking about for a while. And Chang'e 8 will include a 3D printer demo, a rare gas extractor, and other pretty exciting technologies like an autonomous vehicle demonstration. Most relevant of all to what I'm going to be talking about, Chinese government officials have stated that the first human missions to the lunar surface will occur after Chang'e 8, and our assessment to date shows that these first human landings will likely occur before the end of this decade. Russia can be expected to complement China's deep space activities, and as many of you may know, last month China and Russia jointly released a guide for partnership for all international partners on their lunar research station, and in this they are taking a page from our own playbook. China isn't able to make such remarkable progress in launching a space station, which I didn't even mention earlier, and launching regular, cadence of robotic missions to the moon and landing robotically on Mars, which recently happened, and plan for all these accomplishments on PLA's goodwill alone. Its civil space program is robustly funded and growing. Bottom line, China has an increasingly whole of government, methodical and focused plan, and they have shown to deliver on the plans they lay out. So why is this important? Before I address that question, let me just tell you a little bit about NASA's own plans in cislunar space. So on the robotic front, we have exciting plans. Through the NASA Eclipse program, NASA plans to launch the first robotic lander since 1968. In early 2022, Intuitive Machines will land a number of small fundamental NASA S&T demonstration payloads. There will be a second flight with Astrobotic, another small company, a startup, in mid-2022 to the lunar equator. This mission will also carry small science and tech demonstration payloads including instruments to examine regolith composition. A third flight, Intuitive Machines 2, will be NASA's first lander at the South Pole and carry other NASA payloads such as a drill for lunar volatiles. In 2023, we will land, hopefully, a 500-kilogram lander at the South Pole, again with Astrobotic, and this payload will include a rover called Viper, and that will carry a number of science and technology demonstration payloads focused on lunar volatiles. There are plans for subsequent CLIPS and CLIPS-sized missions on a biannual basis after that. So you know, if all goes well and if funding profiles remain as we expect them to, NASA has an exciting robotic program for the moon. On the human spaceflight front, I think John Olson had mentioned NASA's Artemis program. It's designed to return humans to the moon using commercial and international partnerships. And unlike Apollo, Artemis will be a series of missions that will help us learn to live and work in space, or learn to live and work in deep space, to be specific. Artemis 1 will launch later this year if all goes well. Artemis 2 will be a flight test with astronauts similar to Apollo 8, where we went around circumnavigating the moon. And we hope soon after that we will have American astronauts landing on the moon. And of course, we hope that this happens before China lands its astronauts on the moon. So with that kind of context and backdrop, let me return to the question I posed above. Why would it matter if China had lunar presence and the United States is lagging? Personally speaking, I'm not speaking for NASA on this particular point, planting flags and footprints on the moon is not as impressive to me, though it's clearly a priority for many in the community, and I fully understand that. I think it's sustainable presence on the moon that is meaningful, and that's where vigilance is necessary. It is easy to go make a one-shot landing on the moon. I think the hard part, and the one that takes strategy and planning and collective will, is the sustainable presence. So what happens if China has it? And that's the question that we've been thinking about. Well, having presence, especially human presence on the moon, will position China to have de facto leadership in defining broad norms of behavior in deep space, which will have long-term consequences for the United States. The world last visited the moon in 1972, an event fewer than 40% of the people alive today witnessed. So saying that we've already been to the moon is weak sauce, as the young people say. Most of the world wasn't alive when the United States last planted a flag on the moon. As President Johnson stated in April 1961, in the eyes of the world, first in space means first, period. Second in space is second in everything. This hasn't changed today. China achieving a lunar landing and a permanent lunar base ahead of the US will dramatically impact America's strategic geopolitical interests. One, the global perception of the United States will be substantially wounded, feeding a narrative of American decline and China's ascendance. Moreover, China will leverage this substantial soft power it would gain from lunar preeminence to achieve a wide variety of national security, economic, diplomatic, and political objectives. China conducting these activities in partnership with Russia would have even graver implications for national security. As I said earlier, China is already using its achievements in space as an instrument and signal of its rising power, getting many countries in the world not only to collaborate on its space station, but also on the lunar station it plans to create with the Russians. So they're doing all of this to enhance prestige, expand economic and political influence, and build international alliances. China is actively pursuing cooperation with longtime US space allies in Europe, as well as emerging space agencies in the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and South America. I mentioned earlier there's French payloads on one of the Chinese robotic missions. There's French astronauts training in China. Additionally, China is using its lunar efforts to bolster the country's national industrial capacity, and this is a conference on the space industrial base, so this is something we do need to be thinking about, and thanks, Jessica, for giving such a comprehensive talk on our industrial base in semiconductors and more broadly speaking. And we need to think similarly about the space industrial base as well. China's using its activities to drive innovation, echoing the substantial economic and technological benefits the United States gained from its space program. Deep space activities will drive China's superiority in areas like AI, autonomous operations, and robotics. All important areas where we all need to be the best. China's leadership has integrated their human lunar program into part of a holistic effort to achieve national cohesion. And again, this is something this conference does a really good job at, to kind of bring attention to the fact that we need to work together, we need to collaborate, the civil, the intelligence, the military, and the commercial community. Just like they are moving steadily out to influence and create a presence in near abroad areas like South China Sea and Mekong River headwaters areas, cislunar space is very likely to become a part of the off-Earth near abroad for China. And honestly, at some point in the not too distant future, access to resources on and around the lunar surface may become vital. These resources range from strategic sea lane-like orbits to resources such as water on the surface of the moon, that doesn't have to be launched out of the Earth's deep gravity well. China will likely shape and develop the future use of these resources in the same way they have done terrestrially, while using scientific investigations as a veiled cover for such activities. Arriving first and staying on the moon will position China to claim choice, resource-rich terrain. Not only claim the resources, but also establish rules of the road, potentially, and again, this is speculation, but it is consistent with terrestrial behavior, potentially including the creation of economic exclusion zones, similar to China's assertions in the South China Sea and other areas on Earth. This could lead to a de facto leadership role in defining broad principles of behavior for the moon and cislunar space. So what does this mean for what the United States does? Opinions might differ, but I believe that by being the first to establish a sustainable presence on the lunar surface, the United States will retain both the perception and the reality of national preeminence and be able to leverage substantial soft power to achieve geopolitical objectives and support American values. Moreover, the United States will be able to deepen its alliances with international partners, including possibly Russia, while expanding future collaborations to include new partners in the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and South America. NASA is an instrument of soft power for the United States. Artemis can be a means to both advance our competitive advantages and to offer an opportunity for engagement, particularly when tied to larger national and foreign policy objectives in relation to China. Let me end my remarks with some key takeaways that I hope will be useful in your deliberations over the next couple of days. First, we have to understand that China has increasingly credible and well-resourced plans for robotic and human space exploration, with a record of successful and ambitious missions achieved on aggressive timelines. This is a whole of government effort on their part. To date, the United States has been a global leader in space. However, in recent years, we have failed to maintain and follow through on a single Beyond LEO program. And US global leadership in space exploration is at risk. The United States cannot afford to cede these overwhelming benefits we've had to China. If we don't succeed, China is poised to fill this void by maintaining consistent plans that are materializing at an impressive pace. Remember, China is using our playbook and inviting other countries to join in collaborative exploration of the moon. In my views, it is essential that the United States maintain a credible, well-resourced, and consistent cislunar effort over the next decade. It is essential that the Artemis program receives sufficient support to establish an American presence in cislunar space and on the surface of the moon as quickly as possible. Building on these objectives, the United States can maintain global preeminence and leadership in space, be positioned to establish norms of behavior at the moon and cislunar space and beyond, remain the partner of choice for existing international partners while building new alliances, very important, and bolstering the domestic economy, industrial base, technological innovation, and the vital STEM workforce. Actually, on the workforce front in particular, an exciting and vibrant Artemis program will also bolster America's ability to attract the best global talent while enhancing the size and diversity of the current US STEM workforce. Growing and diversifying the American STEM workforce and leveraging international expertise is critical, since China can draw upon a talent pool of 1.3 billion people domestically. Without a consistent record of execution, many of NASA's partners could find China's operations more attractive, a scenario that I would prefer not to have to imagine. So those are the thoughts I wanted to share with the group. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Dr. Lal. Very, very thought-provoking. I'd like to open up questions, whether it's in the chat with Scott would bring them for both Dr. Lal and Jessica McBroom. If there's anyone in the live audience that would like to ask a question, please let us know. Scott, I think you have one, or we have Rick Tomlinson.
Doctor, first of all, love your focus on the Chinese orientation. A hint or a suggestion might be, if you could convince them that the Senate launch system is the American vehicle of choice, maybe they would copy that, and then we would be safe from them opening the solar system forever. As opposed to free enterprise is what I mean. The question I have, though, is given, first of all, what you've said, what I've heard from Space Force, AFRL, right on. But I'm concerned that there are, shall we say, old space traditionalists, probably within feet of where you're sitting, who are still looking at the old models, Artemis being Apollo 2.0. And I'm wondering, is there a real push going on? So, for example, if you're looking at settlement or permanence, then co-locating the different landings of the Artemis series, reusable, recyclable materials, deposits of equipment, forward basing of supplies, things like that. Is that really sinking in post that flag and footprints mission? Is that really sinking in outside of your room and your office?
So that great question, Rick. We absolutely, I think there's absolute understanding at NASA that Artemis is not Apollo 2.0. We have extraordinary capabilities in the commercial sector, as you can see from the HLS award NASA made, and there's extraordinary capabilities we have with international partners. So this is not a one and done activity. This is something that we will do with our partners in commercial and international domains. Change is hard. NASA has a lot of stakeholders. We have to, thread needles carefully. As you can imagine, it isn't so easy. It's a big ship. It's hard to turn. We have, our goals are wide. I mean, there are things we need to do because of constituencies across the board, across the country. And I think as long as we keep making forward progress, we are doing well. And I have been following NASA for many years, not as long as you, but long enough. And I think NASA is making progress. And the CLIPS program, for example, is doing very well, and we hope to continue to grow it. and other things that we want to be able to do with commercial entities using fixed price or other more innovative contracting mechanisms. We are starting to experiment. So I think we are on a good clip. We just need to stay on course.
Okay, I think we have a question. Oh, there we go.
Hi, I'm Joel Sercel, CEO and founder of TransAstra Corporation. I really appreciated your remarks. I have a question about NASA culture in the 21st century. That is, NASA has a wonderful tradition, and you alluded to it a little bit in your remarks. For example, the careful planning that would be required to do a sustainable lunar presence. NASA has a wonderful tradition of careful planning and study, doing a lot of that, and a failure is not an option approach. Meanwhile, we have NewSpace, which has validated agile methods where we go fast and fail often early so that we build robust systems through practical learning. I wonder if you could remark on is NASA embracing those methods, and how will NASA, and if you are, how will you embrace the new fail fast to succeed methods that entrepreneurs are proving in space in order to increase the cost effectiveness of our space efforts? As an entrepreneur and a former NASA person, I just think that's critical, and I'd love to hear someone stand up and talk about that. You know, like the test rate on SLS compared to, say, the test rate on, you know, Starship or New Glenn or something like that. You know, cost effectiveness.
Great question, Joel. Great to hear from you. I follow your and your company's work closely. It's very exciting what you're doing. Keep doing, and I hope we are able to help. So to your question, I mean, NASA culture, we've been around since 1958. It's not as easy to change cultures as you can imagine, and we have. Governments don't have the same kind of flexibilities startups do, right? I mean, if a major accident at NASA is going to be treated very differently than, a major accident with a small company. So I don't think it's reasonable to expect that NASA should behave as a startup. Having said that, NASA isn't a single monolith. We have 10 field centers, all of which have different cultures, right? They've all grown up in different ways and different levels of support from their regional representatives. And I think the NASA is trying lots of different experiments, right? So the COTS CRS experiment, I mean, NASA should get a lot of credit for really breaking from the past and doing something in a new and different way. And now other parts of the government, DoD, for example, are trying to replicate that model. CLIPS is another area where NASA is trying something new and different. HLS is an area where NASA is trying something new and different. And again, we don't know how that will go. But there's experiments underway across the board, and some will work and some will not work. But we will keep trying and making tremendous progress as we have done. Human spaceflight is different than science missions. Robotic missions are a little bit easier to experiment with. Human missions are harder. We have a lot of sort of political issues at stake there. But as long as we keep changing and evolving, it's a good thing. And that's kind of my answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We have another question live. Please go.
Hey, Bhavya, it's Fred Kennedy. How you doing?
Hi, Fred.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Your comments were super cogent. I really appreciated what you said, and what really resonated with me was the comment you made about the needed collaboration between civil defense, IC, and the commercial private sector. I think that's going to be absolutely critical. And I think the way you laid out the argument in terms of the possibility of diminished US hegemony, or call it what you will, as we move further into the 21st century, based on what you're seeing with China, I think we have to get there with this needed collaboration. I heard some speakers earlier from Space Force and here at the research lab talk about perhaps a lack of vision that might be present. And I thought, wow, it seems to me that there could be no greater vision than getting all of our various national interests working together, NASA, DoD, et cetera, to go work this problem. There is all sorts of reasons for DoD to be out in Cislunar, all sorts of reasons. And there's no reason why NASA and DoD and others can't get together, and frankly, companies like the one that I'm running can't get together and get this done. So I guess my only question to you is, how's it going with DoD and you guys, looking into some particular activities you might be able to work on it, with, or how is that going right now?
It's a really good question. I think it's kind of important to note that for more than 60 years, NASA has led the world in peaceful uses of outer space. And, we are a civilian agency dedicated to science, exploration, and discovery, and our mission will continue in partnership with other organizations and nations, and we will remain separate from any military branch of the government. I mean, when we kind of have disdain for China having this sort of civil military fusion, right? We want to make sure that we are, we remain civil oriented and focus on humanity and how humanity moves out in the solar system. Having said that, this is no reason not to coordinate well and collaborate with the national security side. As you mentioned, Fred, we have a lot of common equities. NASA, the national security community has need for space domain awareness in cislunar space. And NASA having cislunar presence in some ways gives our broader community that space domain awareness, right? So if there's NASA astronauts going, there's NASA satellites, there's NASA, robotic missions in between here and Mars, it's good information across the board. And when there's bad actors or bad behavior, we will be able to see it, right? So that's where we kind of need to work together with the with Space Force. We actually do have a memorandum of agreement or a memorandum of understanding that was signed in September 2020 to collaborate in human space flight, space transportation, space operations in space, scientific research, and planetary defense. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that MOU. It's actually quite expensive. There are high-level meetings between our leaders and also working level committees on various topics of interest. And one topic of close interest to my heart is on-orbit servicing, assembly, and manufacturing, OSAM. I think there is, and I know that there's others, Gordon Ressler and others, who will be talking at this conference about the space superhighway. And so the component pieces of that are of interest to both the NASA, the civil side, the commercial side, intelligence and military. So that's one area where we need to work really closely together, and the fact that there is working level collaboration is a good thing. We need to do better, we need to just keep trying to make sure that we don't operate in silos. We have support from our congressional committees to collaborate more. We have support from OMB and the budgeting entities to make sure that we have national coordinated plans, especially for things like OSAM or a space superhighway. Those are important areas. So we need kind of both top-down support for the kind of things you're talking about, but also bottom-up activities that I know are underway and can be better.
All right. Well, so Gordon, do you want to come up and ask the question? I know we're going a little over schedule, but I think these are important questions. So I'd like to, Gordon, come up so then they can show you and Bhavya can see who's asking these questions.
Bhavya knows what I look like.
This is Gordon Ressler.
But this question is actually from Ms. McBroom. Just wondering, but I really want Bhavya to hear the answer. If the task force at NSC and NEC on supply chain has come across any specific supply chain issues that might affect the Artemis program?
I think that is a good question. I know that in the one-year reviews, the Department of Defense will be undertaking, in addition to their handful of other required industrial base reviews, undertaking a look at a number of sectors which could impact space. And so I think, as we continue to build that effort, which is going to be led by the Office of Industrial Policy at DoD, and hopefully include a round of fulsome stakeholder engagements, that, as we continue to sort of make those identifications, we can work with you all to sort of build resilience in supply chains, specifically with regard to space.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and to add to that, Gordon, NASA has supply chains internationally as well, right? Orion, some parts of Orion are being manufactured in Europe, so we need to make sure those supply chains are secure. I mean, the coronavirus protections have restricted access to supplier facilities. I mean, those are being lifted, but there, we anticipate a lag as suppliers catch up, along with an increase in material costs. But we are working with suppliers to time purchases and take advantage of bulk buys to minimize impact to the programs. But that's definitely a concern, and we need to pay close attention to it.
Thank you very much.
So we have a virtual question, and we want to include our virtual audience since this is a hybrid conference. This is coming from Michael Mealing to panelists and attendees. The question is, having spoken to congressional members and staffers, there is still the perception that these problems and opportunities are, and this is a direct quote, at least 100 years in the future and not an immediate policy or budget priority for us. How do we change that lack of urgency and focus?
So are you saying things like resource extraction on the moon is seen as something that's 100 years out? Is that what is meant? Sorry, I'm trying to understand the question.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I think part of it is continuing to move forward and make progress. So for example, just kind of sticking with the ISRU on the moon example, we do need to have spacecraft on the South Pole. We need to begin to see how we extract water, how useful is that water, how possible it is to break it into its component elements. So I think we cannot be sure how it's, where it's going, or if there's $1 trillion market there, right? That's kind of part of the issue. But we will not know unless we actually go there, start doing things. So I'm a huge proponent of starting to do stuff, seeing how things are going, being open, transparent, share with our commercial international partners, make progress, and then adjust expectations as we evolve. Does that, I hope that helps. I guess the point I want to make is I don't think it's like this here or here, right? We need to kind of just make these incremental steps and understand, what's the reality? What's reality on the ground?
Okay, so we have three more questions. If you don't mind sticking with us, like I said, we'll be a little flexible with the schedule. This is Peter Garrettson.
Hello, Peter Garrettson. So my question to the panel and primarily to Jessica is, it was noticeably absent that space was not one of the 4 areas addressed in the Executive Order 14017. And one of the things that Bhavya hinted at, but didn't fully portray, was that the Chinese long-term vision is, of course, exactly in these industries of the future that the Biden administration says they're interested in. And they foresee, an eventual Earth-Moon industrial zone where they've industrialized the moon to provide 10 trillion annually. And so, NASA can certainly lead, but without production targets or, a whole government plan for how to leverage, commerce and industry with, like, what are we trying to produce there? How many commercial partners are we going to have there? Why is it that space was left out of it? Because the 4 that you mentioned are, to a large extent, these are horses that have left the barn. But space right now, we have a competitive advantage, but it's under active predation by the, in the same manner that 5G and the others have been. So we would not like to see the same sort of failure in space that we've seen in these other, why was space left out of the Biden examination of these supply chains?
Yeah, thank you, sir, so much for the question. We really appreciate it. As the person who pretty much shepherded the executive order through the drafting process and through the implementation process, I note that there really are sort of two pillars of the EO here. One, there was the sort of immediate need for the four critical product areas, which I listed off earlier. And then second, we have this 1-year-long review process, which will touch upon the defense industrial base, including some space issues to complement their existing reports on industrial capabilities, as well as the Executive Order 13806 report. So that's one bucket of continuing reviews that will be done. A second one on the energy industrial base, a third on transportation, a fourth on agriculture and food production, a fifth on ICT and industrial base issues in that sphere, and sixth, biopreparedness and health. And the EO also calls for a quadrennial review of supply chain problems, and for agencies to continue to deepen this effort over the coming years. And so what I think EO 14017 is really about is about turning, the aircraft carrier that is the US federal government into a single direction, which focuses on, that nexus of economic security and national security, that focuses on the health of our supply chains and our industrial bases. And I think this is our opening salvo. This is our first 6 months. We are already getting a number of agencies spun up that really don't have these capabilities, right? Agriculture has never done a review of its sort of food sources. And so I imagine this as a first step in turning the aircraft carrier. And I can definitely see additional areas where we can add in, space industrial base reviews, fold in the good work that NASA is already doing to monitor these industrial bases and grow them. And finally, make sure that, we have that crossover between, commercial supply chain resilience and the needs of the federal government. Over.
Okay, so we have 2 more questions from Dr. Tom Cooley and then Brian Plewelling, and that's it.
Good morning, Tom Cooley. Excellent presentations. We're going from the essay portion of the answer to the quick, short answer. First question, when will the National Space Council meet? That will bring attention back to space. When will they meet?
Well, NASA doesn't get to control that. Maybe Jessica has more insight being at the Executive Office of the President. My sense is that they have the Vice President is excited about having a National Space Council, and I know that they are selecting an executive secretary of the council, and I'm sure as soon as he or she is on board, there will be a meeting.
Sorry, that was directed largely to Jessica.
I don't have an answer for you, but tell you what, I'll go back to my desk and I'll ask that question and see if I can get back to you all.
Outstanding. The second question really is for you, Bhavya, which is, you talked about the partnership really with the DoD and the desire to move that. Is there a mission the US Space Force should be given that would help this entire enterprise, which you've described?
So I think there's plenty of people advising the U.S. Space Force on their mission. So I don't want to add more to that. But speaking as an individual, not as NASA, and I think I said this earlier, I think we need to move out on the space superhighway concept, on orbit servicing, assembly, and manufacturing technologies and capabilities, and that is not something NASA or commercial or any part of the space sector can do by itself. So Space Force will have to be part of that. NRO will have to be part of that. NASA will have to be part of that. Commercial entities would have to be part of that. So, as we do more space, in-space transportation, space logistics, propellant depots, all of the stuff that you all will be talking about during this conference, that cannot happen without Space Force.
Thank you. Yes, it was really with the Chatham House rules that I was asking that, because I'm sure you're not going to take official NASA policy, but are there other things, again, space domain awareness, other things that need to be clearly articulated in terms of getting past sort of the traditional US Space Force missions?
I need to interrupt this. The plenary sessions are not Chatham House rules, just the working group. So, just so
About
you
that,
know.
thank you very much. I think you've answered my question.
Brian, you just introduced yourself.
Sure. Hi, Bhavya. This is Brian at EXO. I'd just kind of like to suggest, we've been inspired by the MOU between US Space Force and NASA. We've seen a lot of the language and a lot of elements that have kind of come together separately. And I think the vision that in the arguments you laid out was excellent as far as the way the narrative's been going. But in most domains of military operations, the goal is to have kind of an information advantage. And I think information is certainly an important, the supporting data services element of probably a sustainable presence in the moon as well. So is there maybe a natural division of labor between getting the engineering and the fail fast and learn by doing and get to the destination, but then also the establishment of all of those support information services that need to be distributed throughout cislunar space? And does that maybe help empower our allies to also achieve their abilities to operate in that domain? I think there may be kind of a kernel of an idea of how to, in the same way that GPS and within the history of the US Air Force made such an impact on the economic terrestrial issues almost as important as the US dollar, does that translate now as we move out into deeper space? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great thought, and I absolutely 100% agree that it does. I mean, my one way I think about this is, John Marburger said this back in the 1990s. We need to bring the solar system into the human or our current, our economic realm, and obviously space is a different domain. Things operate differently than they do on Earth, but in many ways, the same sorts of logistics services we need terrestrially, we need in space, whether it's space domain awareness information, comms, power. I mean, there's a host of activities and services, and many of them information oriented that we need in space, and we do need to think about all of those as a space infrastructure, and we need to start to move out and leverage capabilities of companies like EXO and others that are doing such an extraordinary job, getting us, for example, space domain awareness in deep space and out to geo and beyond.